This is a special presentation. Welcome to the Inside Track, presented by Red Shores. Here is your host, Peter MacPhee.
Well, thanks very much, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Track. I have a guy who I'm very familiar with here tonight on our show, and looking forward to talking to him here tonight. It's Brian MacPhee, and Brian, welcome to the Inside Track.
Thanks for the invitation, Peter. It's great to be here.
Yes, and first of all, Brian, we want to ask you, now I know you come from a family with deep harness racing roots here in PEI. I'm familiar with it as well, but I want to ask you about your earliest memories of horse racing as a young person.
Just being brought up a couple of doors down from my grandfather's place. He always had horses in New Haven there. He had brood mares. He had horses that he raced, and my dad kind of went along with it, as did my Uncle Angus and your dad, my Uncle Wayne. All got involved either as owners, breeders, drivers, trainers, and I just kind of fell in love with the horse. Excuse me. I fell in love with the horse, and I haven't lost that love for them yet.
Yes, and again, now who were some of the people? You mentioned obviously the people in the family and your immediate family, but were there others that encouraged you to become involved in the industry as well?
No, just people around that were involved in the horses. It just seemed to be the place to be. The racetrack was the place to be. When I got to be a teenager, it was either the hockey rink or the racetrack. And no, just people around that, you just kind of encourage you to stay with the business, and I'm glad I did.
Yes, again, now I asked you just before we went on the air, I didn't want you to tell me about your first drive because I couldn't remember it, but your first pari-mutuel drive, who gave you that drive, and what was the horse's name?
It was kind of it wasn't a give me that one particular drive. In fact, every winter my dad and a group of his friends and grandmom and their friends went to Florida. I didn't get to go, and I was the fortunate guy that got to stay home and go to St. John and race. And then on this one particular day, we had a couple of Wendell McDonald's horses, one of Blois McPhail's and a couple of our own. And the first one that I happened to be driving that day was owned by Wendell McDonald, a little horse named Ozark Jet. And not a great horse, but a good little racehorse. And I was, what I remember of the drive, I do remember at the three-quarter pole, I was caught in pretty solid. I hadn't made a move to get out, and Francis McIsaac was outside me, a real good friend of my dad's and mine as well.
Yeah.
And Francis was pretty well done of horse. He had used his horse up early, I guess, and he was pretty tired. And he asked me, do you need out? Like, do you have enough horse to get out? And yeah, I thought I did. And anyway, when I did get out, I ended up not passing anybody, but no, it's a pretty vivid memory yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go from there, and I mean that must have been exciting just to be on the track with Francis and a lot of guys that you grew up watching. Of course.
Oh, for sure, of course, Peter. There's some great horsemen out there and some great drivers out there, and you try and look like some of them.
Absolutely. And now your first win. We go from your first drive to your first win. Tell me about that and the horse you drove that day.
My first win, I just got lucky. I got to drive a little mare, a little free-legged mare that was owned by my grandfather. Name was Heather's Pet, and she was named after a family member, as all our horses were through grandfather and grandmother, and I just got lucky enough to ride in the pocket that night. I popped her out at the top of the stretch, and she won, and I think the time was 2:11 and 3. In those times, wouldn't get you much now in a training trip, but at that time it was quite a thrill.
Yeah, what year would that be roughly, your first win?
1977, actually. Yeah, so
okay.
It's back quite a little while ago.
I'm sure the family was out that night too to get the picture as well.
Yeah, oh yeah. But I had a big following and that's kind of carried on right throughout the years.
Absolutely. Brian, you've had some nice horses over the year. I know you had a public stable for a long time here at the track. It's hard to pin down horses as your favorites, but I'm sure there's a few that stick out for you. Oh,
yeah, there are, Peter, and not so much horses that I had as horses that I got to drive over the years. And probably my favorite horse of all time, or in the top 3 or 4, I'd have to name a bunch of them, like Dallas Rocks, which is owned by John Fern, is a great friend of mine, but like a tremendous horse, could make a really bad drive look like a good drive. He had high speed at the time. He was only a 2-minute horse, but that was quite a horse back in the 80s,
yes.
And Rosetown Eagle was another horse that raced top class here. He could slug it out with the best of them every night. My dad had a really good mare, Silverwood Diane. She could beat the open mares when she was on her game. And then Trotter, because I love trotters, was a horseman named Zip the Lip.
Yes.
He was quite a horse around here, and he gave me a lot of thrills.
Yeah. We're going to touch on his race a little bit later on, but is there another race that sticks out for you over your career? Now, I know you've had a lot of wins, and I know you had multiple wins in multiple days, but is there any race that sticks out for you over your career?
Yeah, one race for sure, Peter, the Gold Cup and Saucer.
Yep.
I didn't get to win. I got to drive a wicked horse for Elwood Lawton, a tremendous horseman in Southview Matt, and Elwood and Nancy came and asked me to drive him, and I was elated to get the call on him, and I had driven him a couple of times before that, and yeah, like I could park the whole way, ended up third. Like the horse made a monster trip for the drive I gave him, and yeah, I'll never forget that race ever. Like the chills when you go under that spotlight.
Yeah.
There's nothing. Everything else is secondary.
Well, when
to
you
that.
grow up here to be in that race, that's it really.
Oh, that's it. That is the race you want to be in, and to be in it was quite a thrill. I don't know what the thrill would be like to win it.
Yeah. Well, you did very, very well. Now, I want to touch on your career as a farrier, and just to get your thoughts on why you wanted to go into that side of the business as well.
I guess probably, Peter, just because the first horse I ever owned was a horse that I kind of inherited from my dad, and his name was the Nose, and he used to club his knees pretty hard, and you know, rather than paying somebody to come and do a proper job of shoeing, I like to play with the shoeing end of it myself. I would be probably 16 at the time, and I thought this is a pretty interesting thing. It was kept me in the horses, and it kept me outside. I didn't want an inside job, so it just blew up from there.
Yeah, and you went away. You went to the States, got your course, and came back, and you've done very, very well. I know people still rely on you to this day, but again, just to take that track was something really.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It seemed like the natural thing for me to do. I wanted to be, like I said, I wanted to be with the horses in one aspect or another. The income with a farrier was pretty good income at the time, and there always seemed to be lots of demand for work, and I didn't mind the work ethic. I didn't mind the work part of it. So it worked out fine over the years.
I know they're still relying on you today. You're getting calls all the time. I want to touch on your family as well. We talked about your dad and your mom, who are terrific people. We know that. But your son and your daughter, Brody and Amber, have carried on the tradition. You've got to be proud of that.
Yeah. Oh, I am. I'm glad they're in it, and I'm also glad they're in it in a different aspect now. They're in it for fun, and they're in it for like a secondary income or a hobby or whatever you want to put it, that they don't rely on to make a living. It's a tough game. It's a tough racket to make a living, and they're both using it as a hobby or a secondary income. Yeah. They've both done well. Amber's an excellent trainer, good driver, and Brody stuck mostly to the driving part, but he does a good job of driving as well.
Absolutely. And Brian, finally, we ask everybody who comes on the show to pick a race over the career. Now, you talked about the Gold Cup, and I know that, but there's also a special horse that you drove in Summerside as well as part of the Lee Bell Memorial.
Yep. Yeah, that's the horse I mentioned earlier. Is a horse with the name of Zip the Lip. He came here as a 3-year-old. He had a record of 2 minutes as a trotter, but for some reason or another they switched over to the pace and they couldn't get him back trotting again. Being a farrier, I thought I had a pretty good shot maybe of making him a trotter again. Got lucky, and we did, and I was fortunate enough to get all the drives on him over the next 4 or 5 years, and he won the open trot a lot of times, and he set a track record in Summerside, and that was quite a thing. I had never owned a track record of any kind before, and he owned the all-age track trotting record, and I thought he was quite a horse.
Yeah, very much. So what was it about him? Was there one or two things that stood out about him that made him such a real nice horse?
Yeah, he wanted to be fast. He wanted to be a good horse was his biggest thing. He did have a lot of talent as well, but he was pretty squirrely when we started with him. He would make breaks behind the gates because he was so anxious. When we got him settled down, relaxed, and helped teach him how to race a little bit, he actually went back to Ontario after we raced him the first year, and he went back and made 40 or 50,000 and ended up back here the following year for the rest of his career. Yeah.
Great horse, Brian. Thanks very much for being on the show today. Great to go down memory lane with you. Yeah. It's been terrific.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate you having me here, Peter. I enjoyed this very much, and it brings back a lot of good memories.
Yeah, absolutely great memories, and best of luck the rest of the way.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate it.
Here's Zip the Lip winning in Summerside for Brian. It was a track record at the time, 2014.
It's post time. Let's send it back upstairs to the call with Vance Cameron.
Open trotters in the Lee Bell Memorial or Money Show, Frill Seeker, Pleasure Girls, Majayan Dillon, Majayan Chester, Caliban Hanover, Zip the Lip on the outside. Top of the stretch. Man, what a beauty. Late Sunday in October. Post time, open trot style. There they go. They're off end trotting, and it's Pleasure Girls leaving out. Money Show is on the rail, third into the turn as they trot over the opening 8. That is Majayan Dillon. Zip the Lip moving up fourth on the outside. On the rail, Frill Seeker will round the turn fifth. Caliban Hanover 6 in the early trailer. That is Majayan Chester. So they're going to the quarter. Pleasure Girls out in front. It might be short-lived because the hot trotter on the island is Zip the Lip. Winner of 4 in a row, takes the lead. In line to Brian MacPhee. Second is Pleasure Girls. Thrill Seeker gonna take a shot now. Opening quarter was solid, 29-2. Here comes Thrill Seeker now to take over. On the rail, Zip the Lip is second. Pleasure Girls trotting there at the inside third. Money Show is fourth. Then in fifth, Magian Dillon. Caliban Hanover sixth. And Magian Chester seventh. Halfway home, another new leader. Thrill Seeker opening up here for Gary Chappell. Quickly by 4. The half mile was 58-4. Rolling right along in here. Led by Thrill Seeker. Zip the Lip is second. Pleasure Girls at the rail third. Money Show fourth. Magian Dillon fifth. Caliban Hanover sixth. And Magian Chester seventh. 3/4 the next station, and they're led there by Thrill Seeker. Zip the Lip 2 lengths off that leader second. Pleasure Girls right there third. Moving up fourth, Magian Dillon. 3/4 in 1. 28-4. That's track record time if they can hang on. Thrill Seeker at the rail. Zip the Lip, streak on the line. Coming with them now. Third at the rail is Pleasure Girls. Magian Dillon on the outside fourth. They're in deep stretch now. Give them 5. 5 in a row. Zip the Lip does it again in the open trot. Pleasure Girls second. Magian Dillon third.
This has been a special presentation. The Inside Track was presented by Red Shores.